There might have been a few players that helped you win a fantasy championship last year, but not too many were plucked off the waiver wire early in the season. Kyren Williams was. He wasn't even drafted, yet wound up as one of the top fantasy running backs in 2023. Is there a guy that we can identify right now that might be next year's Kyren Williams? All right, let's try to see who it is. But first, what exactly is it that we're looking for?
Well, yeah, I think you said the big one first, which was he wasn't even drafted in fantasy league. So we're looking for guys, not obvious names, right? We're looking for guys that may not be drafted this year, but also we're looking for running backs going into year two. Remember, Kyren, as a rookie, didn't do a whole lot, was entering year two, was supposed to be behind Cam Akers. So maybe some running backs that right now you look at them and you think this guy doesn't really have a path to touches, because that's kind of what people thought about Kyren Williams last year. But as we saw, Kyren Williams had a path to touches. So I think the big thing we're looking for here are year two running backs who have a path, but it's not certain that they're going to be the guy. And also probably are going to be going very late or undrafted in fantasy leagues.
And I'll just say before we get to the first name is this is the place to look because, man, this year's incoming rookie running back class, not too deep. Why not take a shot on a second-year player instead? And let's start with a guy who was picked up here and there and dropped here and there and didn't really stick. But could Rashawn Johnson of the Chicago Bears finally claim the lead role? And if he does, is that enough to really lead him to maybe a starting role on your fantasy team?
I think so. I mean, Rashawn Johnson clearly could be that kind of guy this year. You look at this Bears depth chart. D'Onta Foreman's a free agent. Is Khalil Herbert going to be back? And even if Khalil Herbert is back, is it really a guarantee that Khalil Herbert is just ahead of Rashawn Johnson? I mean, look, we all thought Cam Akers was clearly ahead of Kyren Williams. How did that turn out? Rashawn Johnson was a good prospect. He's a good player. He can play all three downs, between the tackles, and he can catch. So I certainly think Rashawn Johnson fits the bill of a potential Kyren Williams in 2024.
And we mentioned him a lot throughout the season as a speculative ad on several waiver wire videos because we know the talent is there. The situation was kind of there a little bit at times and just didn't really come to fruition because injuries happened. That whole offense was inconsistent. I'll tell you the best addition that the Bears have already made on their offense is a new offensive coordinator. Luke Getsy is gone, and it looks like Shane Waldron is in. Like you said, Foreman probably not coming back. Rashawn Johnson easily could be the number one running back, but also this offense just should be better, whether it's Justin Fields or Caleb Williams at quarterback. Either way, they're going to have a dynamic young playmaker at the most important position, so Rashawn Johnson could definitely benefit. Now, there's another running back that we were both kind of high on as a rookie and didn't wind up doing anything mostly because of injuries, but could Kendre Miller finally carve out a role there in New Orleans, or do you think it's still the Alvin Kamara show?
Oh, I think he certainly could carve out a role. I mean, this is another guy, was a great prospect, just couldn't get healthy last year, but we saw it in that last game against the Falcons, looked great, ran the ball well, scored that touchdown. Alvin Kamara, yeah, he's getting paid a lot of money. They're not going to cut him or anything, but he's been so bad on the ground for 3 straight years, really just incredibly inefficient. I think at a minimum, we see Kendre Miller take over the lead back, kind of that thunder role to Kamara's lightning. Could he supplant Kamara as, a 3-down back? That's debatable, but certainly I think there's a path for him getting significantly more touches in year two.
Well, you know what? I'm going to say the same thing here. We should recognize the fact that this is also going to have a new offensive coordinator, and this is going to make a difference because they might not be relying on Kamara for all those dump-offs like they have in the past. The quarterback situation probably going to be the same, but yeah, they need something else there. Jamal Williams, he's there, but he's just kind of there. Never really got going. Didn't do a whole lot. Why not give Miller a shot? This guy really just needed to stay on the field a little bit more. And if that happens next year, I do think there's a path for him to break out. Now, here's a guy we know is not going to be the starter barring injury because Joe Mixon is still in Cincinnati. But Chase Brown did show some flashes last year at times. Is he going to get enough opportunities, though?
Yeah, I would be so sure to say Joe Mixon is just a starter. I know right now he is the starter, kind of like Cam Akers was the starter last year. But remember, Joe Mixon had to take a pay cut just to stay with the Bengals. So it's not like the Bengals are all in on Joe Mixon. Not like Alvin Kamara where they're paying him $1 bazillion. Chase Brown showed flashes. Chase Brown showed burst. I do think the one knock here on Chase Brown is he's not the biggest guy. He doesn't profile as a 3-down back. So Joe Mixon probably will still be involved even if Chase Brown maybe does become, say, the 1A or the more explosive guy. But like you said, Joe Mixon's still there, probably still going to be there, and probably still going to get most of the touches. So Chase Brown's path, I think, is maybe not as clear as the first two guys.
He's really good as a receiver out of the backfield, and he's one of the fastest out of this entire rookie running back class from a year ago. Ran a 4.4 3.40, and we saw what he could do with those big plays, especially as a receiver. But although he's the guy I feel has probably the least chance to become, let's say, a 3-down back, he's probably still the guy I'm most interested in fantasy because of that upside on any given play, any given week. So it remains to be seen exactly how much he's involved next year. All right, let's reach a little deeper. Saquon Barkley is everything in the New York Giants backfield, except what if Saquon Barkley is not there? We know the whole drama from last year. Is he a Giant next year? And if he isn't, could Eric Gray be the guy who takes his place?
Yeah, Eric Gray was another running back. Not one of my favorite prospects last year, but I liked him as kind of a sleeper running back, but of course stuck behind Saquon Barkley. This one really is going to come down to Saquon Barkley and I guess the NFL draft, right? If they let Saquon Barkley walk in free agency, then it comes down to what do they do in the draft or in free agency, do they replace him? But, Eric Gray certainly has a path if Saquon Barkley is gone, because who else is here? I mean, like Gary Brightwell, Matt Breida, is he even going to be back? I mean, there's not a lot of competition here, so certainly Eric Gray is a name to watch, and if Saquon Barkley was gone, you'd have to really be high on him, but at the moment, we have to assume Saquon Barkley will be back.
Well, I like Gray's skill set. He could be a do-it-all back, very good hands, caught a lot of passes in college. Not blazing speed, but good enough that he can make some plays, and he can run between the tackles. But like you said, if Saquon's still there, then you can pretty much ignore every other Giants running back. And you look at Gray's numbers, 2.8 yards per carry as a rookie, but that was only on 17 carries. He was hardly used. This whole offense was just broken. So I still have some interest in Gray. He's on my radar, but let's see what happens this offseason. And then we know there's change coming in Washington, starting with a new head coach, maybe a new quarterback. Let's see what the Commanders do. Well, at running back, Brian Robinson was great. Antonio Gibson's still there. But is Chris Rodriguez going to be part of the mix as well?
Yeah, don't sleep on Chris Rodriguez. Remember Antonio Gibson, a free agent? I doubt they bring him back. And Brian Robinson, yes, he was good this year, and I'm sure they're going to want to keep him. But remember, he was drafted by Ron Rivera and the previous GM and owner, not the new guys here. So they have no loyalty to Brian Robinson. Now, granted, they didn't draft Chris Rodriguez either, so I guess you could make that argument for him too. But my worries here for Rodriguez is he's more of like a thumping, bruising kind of guy. He's not a great pass catcher necessarily. And Brian Robinson was pretty good, but you never know. Probably going to be the number 2 running back next year, so there's at least a path.
Well, there's a path because he'll probably enter this coming season as the number 2 running back. Injuries happen, especially at running back. So whether you think Brian Robinson is a workhorse or not a workhorse, all it takes is one, banged up knee or ankle or something, and all of a sudden he's not. And Chris Rodriguez is the number 1 running back. There's nothing behind them really. So got to be impressed by the fact that toward the end of the season, on only 10 carries, went for 58 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Jets defense. Wound up with almost 5 yards per carry on the season. Again, small sample, but he showed some flashes. This offense, you'd think, should improve in some way. So, like you said, not a guy that is probably getting drafted, but maybe a nice name to file away towards the end of your draft. So we've got several candidates here. If you're spending a last round pick, taking a flyer on one of these guys who could be this year's Kyren Williams, who would it be?
Well, I do agree with you that I think out of all these guys, Chase Brown has the most upside. He kind of profiles similar to Devon Achane, right? That guy that can rip off long runs, long catches at any time. But I'm going to go with Rashawn Johnson because I think he's the guy who profiles more as a 3-down back and has the clearest path. I do like Kendrick Miller, but I do worry about Alvin Kamara still being there, still being involved. I could see Rashawn Johnson being the guy from week one, no matter what. And I think people are going to sleep on him because, again, he didn't do a ton as a rookie.
I think Johnson has the clearest path to touches and opportunities. Honestly, he's a guy who probably should be drafted in most fantasy drafts this coming season. But if I'm looking at a guy who could really break out, a guy who maybe just needs the chance and can run away with it, I'm going to go with Kendre Miller. Like I said, a new system will be put in place in New Orleans. This is a team that is still pretty good on offense when all things are clicking, and I think they're just going to have to move away from Kamara being the workhorse. But again, all it takes is one injury, and it could be Miller's backfield. He's got the talent. We were high on him throughout this preseason. He never really got the chance to show what he could do until the very end of the year when it was too late. So if I'm going to take a chance on a guy who could break out, I've got my eye on Miller. One of those players could be this year's Kyren Williams, breakout running back. Who could be this year's Puka Nacua as a breakout wide receiver? Well, we talked about that too. Check it out right here.